The moving truck arrived at 6 a.m. My son stood on the porch I'd built, screaming that I was a parasite who'd stolen his inheritance. 15 neighbors watched. I loaded one suitcase, smiled, and drove away. He had no idea the company he thought he'd inherit didn't exist anymore. I'd sold it 48 hours earlier for $8 million, and the house? I owned that too. I came home at 6:18 p.m. with the smell of cold air on my coat and chalk dust still in my sleeves. I had been at the community college late, helping a younger teacher set up a lesson plan. My hands were dry from cheap soap, and I wanted only a quiet kitchen, a chair, and a cup of tea. When I stepped onto the porch, I saw the porch light was on, even though I had not left it on. I also noticed the doormat was not straight. It was turned a little, as if someone had stood there and shifted their weight while waiting. I reached for my key like I had done 1,000 times, and I felt a small calm in that habit. But the key did not slide in the way it should. It hit something hard, like the shape inside the lock was new. I tried again, slower. The metal did not catch. It did not give. It simply refused me. For a moment, I stood still and listened. I could hear a TV from a neighbor's window. I could hear a dog's tags clink once and stop. I could hear my own breath, steady and quiet, like I was trying not to disturb someone in a hospital room. Then I heard the deadbolt turn from the inside. The door opened a few inches, and my son filled the gap like he had been practicing the stance. His shoulders were set, his jaw tight, and his face had that kind of heat I had seen in teenagers when they wanted a fight more than an answer. He did not greet me. He did not ask how my day was. He spoke loud enough for the porch to hear, and it took me half a second to understand that the porch was not empty. He said I was a mooch. He said I had been draining him for years. He said he had carried me like a weight and that he was done. Behind him, the hall light was on, too bright, like a stage light. I could see the outline of someone else in the hallway, standing back, not stepping forward. That was Elowen. She did not look surprised. She looked ready. I turned my head a little and saw the neighbors. They were not all close, but they were close enough. I counted without staring, because counting helps me stay calm. There was a man in work boots holding a paper plate. There was a woman with a dog leash looped around her wrist. There was an older couple by the hedge, pretending they were just walking. There was a teen on a bike, one foot on the ground, leaning forward. There was someone with a casserole dish covered in foil, as if dinner had been interrupted by better entertainment. It was not one or two people. It was a crowd. It was the kind of crowd my son liked. He liked witnesses. He liked control. He said I should take my things and leave. He said I had embarrassed him long enough. He said I was not his problem anymore. He said he was tired of my sad teacher life and my cheap habits. He said the neighbors all knew it anyway. He said it like he had rehearsed it in front of a mirror and like he wanted the words to land in their ears more than in mine. I looked at the lock. It was not the lock I remembered. It had a new brand name stamped in clean silver. On the porch board near the doorframe, I saw a thin line of fresh metal shavings. They looked like tiny glitter, but they were sharp. That told me the change was not old, it was recent. It also told me it had been done fast, and likely with purpose. I kept my face neutral. I did not ask who paid for it. I did not ask why the change happened without a warning. I simply asked, in my steady voice, what he thought he was doing. He answered by lifting his chin and saying I was trying to play victim. He said I loved guilt. He said I loved pity. He said he was tired of it. While he spoke, Elowen stepped closer behind him, but she still stayed in the hallway light, not in the doorway. She did not look at me. She looked at my hands, then my suitcase, then my face. Her gaze was like someone checking a list. I heard her say quietly that he should keep it simple. It was not a mother trying to calm a child. It was a manager trying to guide an employee through a script. I asked about my mail. That was not a dramatic question, but it was a real one. My name had been on that mailbox for years. My bills, my bank letters, my small teacher notices, all of it went through that slot. My son waved his hand and said he had handled it. He said I did not need mail anymore because I did not live there anymore. He said it like it was already decided, like a line drawn in ink. Nell Quince, my next-door neighbor, was near the sidewalk. I saw her mouth open, and I knew she wanted to speak. Nell is the kind of woman who brings soup when people are sick and who notices when a porch light is out. She is also the kind of woman who remembers dates. My son turned his head toward her and cut her off before she could finish a sentence. He told her to mind her business. He said he was doing what needed to be done. He said he did not want advice from busybodies. I stood on the porch for a few seconds longer than was comfortable. I did that on purpose. In my life, I have watched students try to push teachers into reacting. If you react, they feel powerful. If you do not, they do not know what to do with you. My son wanted me to raise my voice. He wanted me to beg. He wanted me to insult him so he could point and say I was unstable. He wanted a scene he could replay later. I did not give him that. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I said I would take my things. I said I would leave now. I said I would not argue in front of the neighbors. My son smiled like he had won. He stepped back and opened the door wider, but he did not invite me in. He pointed toward the hallway like I was a delivery man who had come at the wrong hour. I walked inside, and the house smelled different. It smelled like a new candle and fresh paint, like someone had tried to erase the past with a shopping bag. I went to the room where my few things were. My suitcase was already there, upright, near the bed. It was packed in a way I did not pack. My shirts were folded too tight. My socks were rolled like small stones. That told me someone else had touched them. That told me this was planned, not spontaneous. I took the suitcase. One wheel stuck, as it always did. It made a soft click every 10 steps. I had meant to fix it for years. I never did. I walked back through the hall, past the bright light, past Elowen's quiet face. She watched me like she was measuring my pace. She asked in a careful voice if I understood. I told her I understood that I was leaving. She nodded like a person satisfied with a result. I stepped back onto the porch. The neighbors leaned in without moving their feet. I heard someone cough. I heard a dog whine once. My son followed me to the door and made sure his voice carried. He said he hoped I learned something. He said I should stop living off other people. He said he would not be manipulated anymore. He said it like he was talking to a camera. I walked down the steps. The suitcase wheel clicked. The sound was small, but in that moment it felt loud, like a metronome keeping time for my shame. I did not look left or right. I did not look at the faces. I did not give them the gift of my pain. I walked to the mailbox cluster at the sidewalk because I needed one more fact. I opened the slot where my mail used to be. My name label was gone. The space was clean, like it had been scraped. In its place, there was a new label with my son's name in bold letters. I touched the edge with one finger. It was still slightly sticky. I turned away. Nell's eyes met mine for a second. She looked like she wanted to say she was sorry. I gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness, not blame, just acknowledgement. Then I went to my car and drove. I chose a motel on the edge of town because it did not ask questions. The Pine Needle Motel had a sign that buzzed, and the parking lot smelled like old rain and cigarette smoke. The room was plain. The blanket was thin. The lamp flickered once when I turned it on. At 8:02 p.m., I sat on the bed and listened to the quiet. My phone had messages from my son. He had sent many. Some were insults, some were false kindness, some were warnings. I did not answer any of them. I washed my hands in the small bathroom sink. The water was too hot at first, then too cold. I dried my hands on a towel that felt rough, like paper. Then I opened my suitcase and pulled out my old red grade book. I used it for years, even after the school moved to digital systems, because I liked the weight of it. I liked the way it kept things in order. I laid it on the small desk and opened it. I wrote the time I arrived home, or I wrote the time the door opened. I wrote the names I could remember from the crowd. I wrote the new lock brand. I wrote the line about my mail label being removed. I wrote it all in calm, neat letters, as if I was preparing for a parent meeting, not a war. My phone vibrated again. This time it was not my son. It was a missed call from an unknown number, and the automatic label below it said, "Trust Desk." I stared at that label for a long moment, feeling the air in my lungs get colder. I did not call back yet. I did not rush. I turned the page of the gradebook and wrote one final line at the bottom, slow and clear. Test first, then act. I woke up at 5:40 a.m. because the motel heater clicked on like a tired old clock. The room smelled like bleach and stale coffee. I sat up slowly and listened for a moment, the way I used to listen before a hard day at school. In the parking lot, a car door shut once, then nothing. My phone had more messages from my son. I did not open them yet. I washed my face in the sink and watched the water run clear. Then I put on the same shirt from yesterday because I did not want to look like a man falling apart. At 6:15 a.m., I drove to the public library, not because I loved books, but because libraries hold quiet truth. The sun was still low, and the road looked flat and pale, like it had not decided what kind of day it would be. When I walked into the library, the air had that dry paper smell mixed with floor wax. I nodded at the front desk and went straight to a computer. I searched basic business records, the kind anyone can see if they know where to look. I printed a public summary of the company my son worked in and talked about like it was his crown. I expected to see his name. I did see it. But I also saw another name format that bothered me, a name style I remembered from long ago, like a signature from a different era. It was not proof of anything, yet it was just a mismatch. Still, mismatches matter. In my teaching life, the first clue a student cheated was not the whole answer. It was one word that did not fit the rest of the paragraph. I moved to the microfilm room because I wanted older notices, the ones people forget. The microfilm machine squeaked when I turned the knob, and the screen flickered as if it was waking up too. I scrolled through old local business pages until my eyes hurt. Then I found a short notice from years back, the kind most people ignore. It mentioned a family trust linked to early funding. The words were small and plain, but they sat in my mind like a pebble in a shoe. I wrote the date down in my red gradebook and underlined it once. I did not tell myself a story. I only took the fact. A trust could mean many things, and it could also mean nothing for me now. Still, it was a thread, and I needed threads. At 9:30 a.m., I drove to the community college where I used to teach full-time. I had not planned to go inside, but I wanted to feel the normal world for a moment, to remind myself I was still a person with a life, not just a man being pushed off a porch. The faculty lounge smelled like burnt toast and cheap tea. A few people looked up, surprised, then looked away, like they did not want to be pulled into anything. I saw a younger instructor I once mentored, and I asked how things were going. He spoke politely and said work was busy, and then his eyes shifted, not to my face, but toward a locked cabinet near the wall. I knew that cabinet. It held old staff keys and some archived paperwork. His eyes went there like he wanted to tell me something, but did not know how. I kept my voice calm and asked a simple question about whether anyone had asked about me recently. He hesitated, then said my son had called a few weeks ago. He said my son had asked strange questions. He said my son had asked if I was forgetting things now, and if I had been confused at work. He said my son had tried to sound concerned, but it felt forced, like a performance. I thanked him and did not press him further. I could see fear in the way he held his coffee. Fear makes people shut down. If I pushed, he would retreat. So I only asked one more thing. I asked when the call happened. He told me it was on a Tuesday around 3 p.m. I wrote that down later because time matters. My son had not been preparing a family argument. He had been preparing a story about my mind. I left the campus and sat in my car for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. The leather felt cold. I stared at the empty passenger seat and tried to understand what kind of person my son had become. I had raised him with quiet rules. Tell the truth. Work hard. Do not humiliate people for sport. Yet now he was doing the opposite of all of it, and he was doing it with an audience. The thought hurt, but it did not change the facts. If he was planting the idea that I was unstable, then he had a goal beyond pride. People do not build that kind of lie just to feel powerful for one night. They build it to move something. Around 12:20 p.m., I met Nell Quince at Riverside Park. The air by the river smelled damp and metallic. The bench was cold through my coat. Nell sat close but did not touch me, like she knew I needed space. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine and that I only needed clarity. She looked down at her hands, then said she had seen a courier at my porch 2 days earlier. She said the courier wore a bright vest and carried a flat packet like a thin folder. She said she remembered it because the courier had knocked twice, waited, then looked at the house like he was checking the address again. She said someone inside opened the door quickly and signed. She could not see the name, but she could see the motion of the pen. She also said something else that made my stomach tighten. She said she had heard Elowen, not my son, say the word guardianship at the mailbox cluster a week ago. Nell said Elowen had spoken softly, like she did not want the word to travel, but Nell still caught it because Nell catches everything. I asked Nell to repeat exactly what she heard. She said Elowen had been telling someone that they needed to protect the company and the house from bad decisions. She said Elowen had suggested that if I became a legal problem, there were ways to handle it. Nell did not know what that meant, but she knew it did not sound like love. It sounded like paperwork. I told Nell I believed her. I also told her not to argue with my son or Elowen again. I said I did not want her hurt by this. She looked offended for a second, then she nodded like she understood. She said she had watched me be polite for years. She said she did not want to watch me be erased. After Nell left, I stayed on the bench and watched the river move. It moved the same way it always moved. Not fast, not slow, just steady. That steadiness helped me. I thought about the porch crowd. I thought about the new lock. I thought about the missing mailbox label. I thought about the word guardianship and my son's strange phone call to my coworker. I could feel the shape of a plan forming, like lines on a map. The plan was not complete in my mind, but I could see its direction. They wanted to cut me off, call me unstable, and use that story to control something that still had my name on it. At 2:05 p.m., I drove back to the motel and sat at the small desk with my red gradebook open. I wrote down everything Nell said, in plain sentences, no drama. Then I did something I had been avoiding because it made it real. I called a lawyer. I did not search online for some loud office with big promises. I called Reina Sato, a woman I had met years ago through a school board issue. She had helped a colleague with a contract problem, and I remembered her as careful, honest, and not impressed by shouting. When she answered, I told her who I was. I told her I needed a basic consult. I said it was about family and a business and a possible trust. She asked if I was safe. I said I was safe. She asked if there were threats. I said the threats were mostly in words, and I had saved the messages. She told me, in a firm voice, not to respond to my son anymore. She said every response could be used later to paint me as emotional. She said calm was my friend. I told her calm was all I had right now. Before we ended the call, she asked if I had any old documents, anything with a seal, anything I had signed years ago and forgotten. I looked at my suitcase, at the stuck wheel, at the scuffed corners. I felt a strange shame, because it was just one suitcase, but I also felt something else, something more useful. I remembered a thin envelope I had kept because I never throw away certain things. I told her I might have something. She said to bring nothing into the open yet. She said to keep it safe and not show anyone, not even family. Then she gave me a time for the next day, and she said we would talk in person. After the call, I took out a paper calendar I kept in my bag, the kind with big squares and room for notes. I circled a date 2 nights away, not because I had an invitation, but because I could feel one coming. People who build traps like to set them in familiar rooms. They like dinner tables. They like talks. I wrote 2 words in the square, dinner invite. Then I closed the calendar and sat still, listening to the motel silence. At 6:30 p.m., I ate a plain sandwich from a gas station and drank water from a plastic bottle. It tasted like nothing, but it kept me steady. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my son. I did not open it. I put the phone face down and looked at the suitcase. For a moment, I stayed still because moving meant choosing a direction. Then I reached down and felt along the inside lining, where the fabric folds near the bottom seam. My fingers found the edge of paper tucked flat, hidden like an old habit. I pulled it out slowly, and a thin envelope slid into my hand. At 8:10 a.m., I drove to Reina Sato's office with the thin envelope in my jacket. The sky was gray, and the streets looked washed clean. I parked 1 block away, not from fear, but from habit. Teachers learned to arrive early and watch the room first. Reina's building had a small lobby that smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. Her office door was plain, with her name in simple black letters. When she opened it, her face stayed calm, like mine. She did not act shocked. She did not act sorry. She acted ready. Inside, the conference room was small and quiet. There was a pitcher of water and 2 clean glasses. Reina asked me to sit, and I did. She asked for facts, not feelings. I told her the time I came home, the new lock, the crowd, the suitcase already packed. I told her my mailbox label was removed. I told her about Nell seeing the courier and hearing the word guardianship. I told her about my son calling my coworker and asking if I was confused. Reina wrote notes without looking up much. She did not interrupt unless I skipped a detail. Then she asked about the company and how it started. That question made my chest feel tight for a second. I told her I had been a quiet teacher, but I had also helped in a small way years ago. I told her there was a time when my son was young and I wanted him to have something stable later. I told her I had signed papers then because I believed family meant safety. Reina did not judge me for that. She only asked what I signed and where I kept copies. I placed the thin envelope on the table, but I did not open it yet. I told her I had not shown it to anyone. I said I found it in my suitcase lining, where I keep old, important items. Reina nodded, as if that restraint mattered. She said, in indirect speech, that people who move fast often leave fingerprints. She said my son had moved too fast. She said the lockout and the public scene were not just cruelty. They were useful steps in a legal story. She also said something that felt cold but true. She said they might be trying to create a record that I was unstable so they could control money and decisions. Reina asked if my son had asked me to sign anything yet. I told her not yet, but I felt it coming. I told her Elowen had stood behind him like a quiet supervisor. I told her Elowen had said to keep it simple, like she was coaching him. Reina's eyes narrowed slightly at that. She said, in indirect speech, that a quiet person is often the real operator. She said we needed to learn what Elowen controlled and what she feared losing. Reina told me to keep the envelope sealed for now. She said we would treat it like a key, not like a trophy. She said the first step was confirmation, not confrontation. She gave me a plan in plain words. She said we would verify whether a trust existed and whether my name had any role left. She said if there was a trust, it might have rules that my son did not understand. She did not explain the rules yet. She only said rules exist for a reason. She told me to keep saving every message. She told me not to reply to my son. She told me to avoid family meetings until we had a clearer map. At 10:05 a.m., I drove to Northline Credit Union. The building was modern and quiet, with a glass front and soft music inside. The lobby clock above the teller line was always 2 minutes fast. I noticed that because I noticed things like that. The chairs were stiff, and the air smelled like printer ink and hand sanitizer. I walked to the front desk and said I needed to speak with the trust desk. The receptionist looked at me, then at my ID, then asked me to wait. A man named Cyril Boone came out a few minutes later. He was neat, with calm eyes and a careful voice. He did not smile too much. He shook my hand once and guided me to a small office with a closed door. He asked what I needed. I told him I needed to confirm whether a trust existed connected to my family name and an old business. I kept my words simple. I did not accuse anyone. I did not beg. I spoke like I was asking a librarian for a book. Cyril said he could not discuss details without proper verification and formal steps. He said he also could not confirm names loosely, because privacy rules were strict. I told him I understood. I handed him my identification. I answered his questions. I signed a simple request form that only asked for confirmation and next steps, not for control or money. Cyril watched my hand as I signed, and his face changed slightly, like he recognized something in the way my signature moved. He asked in indirect speech if I had used that same signature style for many years. I told him I had. He looked at the screen, typed slowly, then paused. He did not tell me what he saw. He only said in a softer tone that a file might exist, and that it had a structure that required the right process. I asked if my son could block me from even confirming it. Cyril said in indirect speech that certain roles cannot be erased by anger. He used one word that made my stomach tighten again. He said, protector. I did not react. I did not ask him to explain. I only nodded once, as if I had heard a weather report. Cyril said he could schedule a formal meeting with the proper department if my attorney contacted them. He said he could also provide a simple written confirmation to counsel after identity checks were complete. I thanked him and left, my hands steady, my mind sharper. At 12:30 p.m., I went to Juniper and Ink Coffee Shop because it was neutral ground and it had bright windows. I chose a back table where I could see the door. The smell of espresso and warm sugar did not comfort me, but it kept me awake. My phone buzzed again. My son had sent more messages. Some sounded like apology. Some sounded like blame. Some sounded like threats wrapped in family words. I did not answer. I saved them. I took screenshots. I wrote the times in my gradebook. At 1:05 p.m., a woman named Maris Holt walked in. She wore a delivery jacket and held her phone like it was part of her job. I stood up and greeted her politely. I told her I only needed clarity about a delivery to my porch. She said in indirect speech that she remembered it because it involved a lock change packet and a signature requirement. She said her route log had the date and time. She said she could not give me company records freely, but she could provide a statement if requested through proper channels. That mattered to me. It meant the chain could stay clean. Maris said she arrived at my porch at 3:22 p.m., 2 days before the lockout. She said someone inside opened the door quickly and signed without reading. She said the person acted impatient, like they were trying to finish a task. She said the signature looked rushed. I asked if she recognized the signer. She said she did not know the person's name, but she remembered the initials because they were large and sloppy. She said the initials did not match the neat style of older homeowners she delivered to. I thanked her. I asked if she would be willing to speak to Raina later. She said yes, and she gave me the correct company contact method, not a personal favor. That also mattered. After Maris left, I sat back down and felt the room spin slightly, not from panic, but from the speed of connections. Lock change, courier packet, mailbox label, guardianship word, forgetful phone call, and now the trust desk using the word protector. My son had been building a cage. He thought I would crawl into it quietly. At 3:20 p.m., I returned to Raina's office and gave her the simple facts. I did not bring Maris's phone. I did not bring any papers from the credit union. I brought only the timeline and the names. Raina listened, then leaned back in her chair. She said, in indirect speech, that we were still in the hint stage, and that we would stay there until the right moment. She said we would not show the mechanism early. She said that if the clause existed, and if the roles matched, then the outcome could be lawful, fast, and final. I walked out into the cold afternoon air, feeling my breath turn white. My phone buzzed again with a new message from my son. I did not open it. I only felt the weight of the phone in my pocket, and the weight of one word in my mind, sharp and quiet. Protector. At 7:30 a.m., I met the accountant at Brine and Ledger Accounting in a building that smelled like glass cleaner and printer heat. The office had clean lines and quiet footsteps. A woman at the front desk smiled in a tired way and asked me to sign in. I wrote my name carefully, the way I always do, because I have learned that calm looks like certainty on paper. The accountant, a man with thin glasses and steady hands, led me into a small room with a table and 2 chairs. He did not ask me why my son had thrown me out. He did not ask for gossip. He only asked what I needed reviewed and what access I had. I told him I wanted a basic compliance look, nothing dramatic, just to see if there were patterns that could create risk. I told him I was not there to destroy a business out of anger. I told him I needed truth because my family had turned truth into a weapon. He nodded and said he understood. He said, in indirect speech, that businesses fail more often from sloppy habits than from big crimes. He asked for a timeline and for names connected to approvals. I did not hand him any secret files. I only told him what I knew from public sources and from what people had said. I told him Elowen handled the numbers now. I told him my son acted like the owner. I told him the staff had been told I moved away. The accountant wrote down those phrases like they mattered. He asked if I had ever been an officer or signer. I said I might have been years ago, but I had not touched daily operations in a long time. He said, in indirect speech, that old roles can still matter. He said he could look for red flags if he had a lawful path to review. I told him my lawyer was arranging proper steps. He nodded again and said he would prepare a general risk memo once he could confirm scope. He did not promise miracles, he promised caution. That was what I wanted. When I left, it was 9:05 a.m. The air outside felt sharper, and my hands felt steadier. I did not feel happy, I felt aligned. There is a difference. I drove to Grayspan Industrial Park and parked across the street from the company lobby. I did not go in at first. I sat in my car and watched the morning flow, like I used to watch students enter a classroom. People move in patterns when they think nobody is paying attention. At 9:38 a.m., I saw employees arrive in small groups, holding coffee, scanning badges, talking with shoulders relaxed. I saw a delivery truck back into a bay. I saw a manager gesture with a clipboard. I saw a security guard nod at familiar faces. The company looked normal from the outside, which is what my son wanted. Normal hides a lot. At 10:12 a.m., I stepped out and walked toward the lobby, not as a fighter, but as a man returning to a place he helped once. The lobby smelled like new carpet and metal, like a place trying to look bigger than it was. I stood near a wall display that showed company values in clean letters. One word was integrity. I looked at it for a second longer than I needed to. A man I recognized spotted me. Kellen Drove was the operations manager, and I remembered him as someone who fixed problems without drama. His eyes widened, then narrowed, as if he was trying to decide if I was safe to speak to. He came closer and asked why I was there. I told him I needed to ask a few questions, nothing that would put him at risk. He looked around the lobby before answering, like the walls could report him. Then he said, in indirect speech, that my son had told staff I moved away and wanted privacy. He said my son had warned people not to contact me because it could confuse me. The word confuse landed hard, even though I expected it. I asked Kellen who approved payments now. He hesitated. His lips pressed together. Then he said Elowen did. He said she had pushed for tighter control, for efficiency. He said she asked for fewer people to sign off, not more. I did not react. I only asked if that was normal in their field. He said it was risky. He said, in indirect speech, that one person controlling approvals can create trouble, even if the person is honest. He stopped there. I could tell he wanted to say more, but fear held him back. I thanked him and told him I was not asking him to take sides. I said I only needed truth when the time came, and that truth does not belong to any one person. He nodded once, slow, like he understood what that meant. As I turned to leave, I saw Elowen through a glass wall near the corridor. She was talking to someone with a folder in her hand. Her mouth moved in small, precise shapes. Her eyes shifted toward me for half a second, then away. Her face stayed calm, but something in her posture tightened, like a wire pulled a little too far. She did not wave, she did not approach, she did not want a scene here. This place was her control room, not her theater. At 12:45 p.m., I went to a meeting at Harbor Light Hotel, in a private room that smelled like polished wood and soft perfume. Raina was there with a small file folder and a calm expression. Across the table sat a buyer representative, a man in a plain suit who looked like he had learned to speak without emotion. He introduced himself and said he represented a group interested in acquiring the company. He did not say it like a threat. He said it like weather. Raina asked him what he needed to move forward. He said, in indirect speech, that they needed clean authority and a clear path, and they needed it fast. He said they would not step into a family fight unless the rules were already decided. Raina spoke in short, careful sentences. She did not show any mechanism. She did not spread papers across the table. She only said there were structures in place that could allow a lawful transfer under certain conditions. The buyer representative asked if those conditions were real and enforceable. Raina said they were being verified and that timing was being arranged. The buyer representative said they could hold an escrow window open for a limited period, but not forever. He said the company had valuable contracts and there was demand, but only if the ownership story was clean. He asked if anyone would contest. Raina said people might protest loudly, but loud protest is not the same as legal power. I sat there and listened. I did not act proud. I did not act scared. I watched the buyer's face when Raina used certain words like compliance, duty, and breach. Those words made him lean forward slightly, like he understood the map. It told me this was not fantasy. This was real business, real consequence. At 3:10 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new message from my son. I had not opened his messages all day, but I saw the preview line because the phone lit up. It said he wanted to talk and that he was sorry. It said he wanted to fix things. It said he wanted me at dinner tomorrow night. It said family should handle family matters privately. The tone was soft, but it felt staged. When I showed it to Raina, she did not smile. She said in indirect speech that dinner invitations like that often come with papers. She asked if I had been asked to bring ID. I said not yet. She said they might ask soon. Less than 20 minutes later, Elowen called. Her voice was gentle, almost kind, the way someone speaks when they want you to forget you are being led. She asked if I received the invitation. She said my son felt terrible. She said they wanted to make things right. She said it would be best if I brought my identification because they wanted to update some things and make sure I was taken care of properly. She said it like she was offering a gift. I heard the trap in the words, not because I was smart, but because I was calm enough to listen. I told her I would come. I told her I appreciated the effort. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I said it in the same tone I used with parents who tried to pressure me at school meetings. Agree to the meeting. Do not agree to the story. Elowen sounded relieved. Then she ended the call quickly, like she had checked a box. At 5:40 p.m., I drove back to the motel and sat at the desk with my red gradebook open. I wrote down the dinner time. I wrote down Elowen's exact words about ID and being taken care of. I wrote down the buyer's mention of a limited window. I wrote down Kellen's warning about single approval control. I did not write my feelings. I wrote facts. Then I took a small item from my suitcase, the thin gold tie clip I almost never wore. I set it on the table and looked at it for a long moment. I remembered wearing it once at a school award ceremony when my son was young and still proud of me. The memory hurt, but it did not change what was coming. I understood something very clearly that evening. My son thought the dinner was his stage, like the porch was his stage. He thought he would use a family table to finish what he started on the sidewalk. He thought I would come in with shame and leave with less. I closed the gradebook and placed it under my hand, like a promise. Then I picked up my phone and sent one simple message to Raina, because she had asked me to keep her informed and because timing was now part of the weapon. I told her the dinner was set. I told her Elowen wanted my ID. I told her my son's apology sounded rehearsed. Raina replied with one short line that made my stomach settle into a quiet, hard focus. She said the meeting window could be scheduled and it could end before dessert. I sat on the motel bed in the dim light and listened to the heater click again. Outside, a car passed, and its headlights moved across the wall like a slow blade. I did not feel anger. I felt readiness. I knew the next night would not be about forgiveness. It would be about control, and who still had it when the room went quiet. At 8:25 a.m., I walked into a small storefront called Parcel and Notary because it was neutral and ordinary places do not draw attention. The bell above the door rang once, and the air smelled like ink pads and cardboard. A rack of padded envelopes stood near the counter, and a row of cheap pens was chained down with thin cords. The notary, an older woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked up and asked what I needed. I told her I needed a simple notarization for a basic statement and identity verification. Nothing dramatic. I did not tell her about my son. I did not tell her about the company. I did not give her a story she could repeat later without meaning to. She asked for my ID, and I handed it over. She checked the photo, checked my face, and then stamped the page with a seal that made a dull thump on the counter. The wooden handle on her stamp was cracked, and her thumb kept sliding over the crack like she had used it 1,000 times. I watched the stamp land and lift, and I thought about how a small sound can change a life when it is timed right. When I stepped back outside at 9:10 a.m., the air was cold and clean. My car door felt stiff, like it had not been opened in years, even though it had been opened yesterday. I drove back to the Pine Needle Motel because I did not want to move around too much. Moving too much makes you visible. I wanted to be a man people forgot about for one more day. The motel clerk nodded at me without interest, which was perfect. In my room, I laid my red grade book on the desk and wrote down the notary time, the location, and the service. I wrote it like a teacher logging attendance, simple and exact. Then I opened my phone and looked at my son's messages, not to feel anything, but to preserve the pattern. He had sent one long message late at night, then 3 shorter ones early in the morning. In one, he said he missed me and wanted peace. In the next, he said I had ruined his life. In the next, he said I should stop acting like a victim. The shifts were fast, like a man trying different keys in a lock. I saved each one. I took screenshots. I wrote the times down. Raina had told me the tone would matter later, and I trusted her. At 10:40 a.m., Raina called. Her voice stayed calm, like always. She said she had spoken with the proper people and scheduled what she needed on her side. She did not say details over the phone. She only said, in indirect speech, that timing was set and that I should not talk about it to anyone. She reminded me to bring nothing to dinner except myself, my patience, and my ability to say no. She also told me to avoid being alone with papers at the table. She said if they slid something toward me, I should not touch it. She said they might try to make it look like I agreed to something just by handling it. I told her I understood. I asked if I should respond to my son at all. She said no. She said silence was not weakness. She said silence was discipline. After the call, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and looked at my suitcase. The wheel still stuck. I pressed it with my thumb and felt the rubber give slightly. It was such a small thing to notice when my life felt huge and unstable, but small things keep me anchored. I reached into the suitcase and checked the lining again, making sure the thin envelope and my other old items were still where they belonged. I also checked the blue ceramic owl paperweight I kept wrapped in a sock. It was heavy in my hand, smooth and cool. It had once sat on my desk at school, holding down quiz papers. Now it held down something else, in a different way. I put it back gently. Then I sat down at the desk and made a short list in my gradebook of what I needed from today. Not documents, not confrontations, just people. Witnesses, calm support, neutral eyes. At 12:15 p.m., I drove to Riverside Park, because it was the only place that felt honest right now. The river moved without caring about my family, and that helped me breathe. I parked near the trail and walked slowly, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. My legs felt stiff from motel sitting. When I saw Nell Quince near the bench, she stood up fast, as if she had been waiting. Her cheeks were red from the wind, and she had a knitted hat pulled down to her eyebrows. She asked if I had eaten. I told her I had. That was not fully true, but it was close enough to keep the conversation steady. She asked if my son had apologized. I said he had invited me to dinner. Her mouth tightened at that, like she could already taste how fake the dinner would be. I told Nell I needed her to come with me. I did not ask her to fight. I did not ask her to speak. I only asked her to be there, in the room, as a neighbor, as a person who had watched the porch scene. I told her there was power in a quiet witness. Nell looked offended again, not at me, but at the idea that she needed permission to be brave. She said, in indirect speech, that she would not let me walk into that house alone. She said she had seen too many people bullied in private after being shamed in public. She said she would sit at the table and sip water if that was all she was allowed to do. I thanked her, and I meant it. We walked along the river path for a few minutes. Nell pointed out a family of ducks and tried to make the world feel normal. I let her. Then I asked her one careful question. I asked if she had seen anyone else around my porch in the days before the lock change, besides the courier. Nell thought, then said she had seen a black sedan parked across the street for a while one afternoon. She said she had assumed it was a visitor, but the person did not get out. She said the car sat there, then left. She said it felt like watching, not visiting. I wrote that down later in my mind, not because it proved anything, but because it added texture to the pattern. People who plan like to watch the scene before they perform it. Before we parted, I reminded Nell not to argue with my son, no matter what he said. I told her if he tried to pull her into drama, she should stay calm and let him hang himself on his own words. Nell nodded slowly. Then she said something that surprised me. She said she had heard my son on the phone last week, outside, pacing near the mailbox cluster. She said he sounded angry, and she heard him say he needed it done before the weekend. She said she did not know what it meant then, but now she wondered if it meant the dinner, or the paperwork, or whatever they were building. I thanked her again, and told her she had done enough. She disagreed, but she still let me leave. At 3:05 p.m., I returned to the motel. The room felt smaller than it had in the morning, like the walls were leaning in. I turned on the lamp, and it flickered once. I sat at the desk and wrote down everything Nell said, with times and plain language. Then I checked my phone. There was a voice message from my son. I did not want to listen, because listening would bring his voice into my room, and I did not want him in my room. But facts are facts, and I needed them. I pressed play with the volume low. His voice started soft. He said he was sorry. He said he had been stressed. He said he had said things he did not mean. Then, within the same minute, his tone shifted. He said I had embarrassed him for years. He said I should stop making him look like a villain. He said I should come to dinner and sign whatever needed to be signed so everyone could move on. He said it like an order, not an invitation. I saved the message. I wrote the timestamp. I did not replay it. At 6:20 p.m., I ate a small meal from a paper box and drank water. My stomach felt tight anyway. I laid out my clothes for the next day like I was preparing for a school meeting. Clean shirt, plain jacket, no fancy anything. Then I took the thin gold tie clip from my pocket and held it in my palm. I decided I would wear it, not as a statement to them, but as a reminder to myself. I was not walking into a family dinner. I was walking into an evaluation, and I would not lose my balance. At 9:40 p.m., I turned off the lamp and lay down. The motel heater clicked. Outside, a car passed, and the headlights slid across the wall. I did not sleep much. My mind kept replaying the porch scene, not as pain, but as evidence. Around 3:12 a.m., I sat up in the dark and listened to my own breathing. I reached for my phone, locked it, and set it face down. Then I got up, clipped the tie clip onto my tie in the mirror, and told myself one simple truth in a calm voice that did not shake. Tomorrow, I will let them talk first. I arrived at Soren's house at 6:44 p.m. with Nell Quince beside me. The air smelled like cold leaves and car exhaust. The driveway lights were bright, like a showroom. My suitcase was not in my hand this time. I carried only my phone, my wallet, and the calm I had practiced all week. Nell held her small purse close, and she walked with the stiff courage of someone who refuses to be moved. Soren opened the door fast, like he had been waiting behind it. He smiled too wide and said he was glad I came. His voice was loud, like he wanted the walls to remember it. Behind him, Elowen stood in a clean dress with her hair pinned back. She looked like a person who had prepared a meeting, not a dinner. The dining room smelled like roasted meat and sweet candles. The table was set with matching plates and folded napkins. Everything looked planned down to the last detail, as if they wanted control to show on the surface. Soren guided us in and told Nell she was welcome, but his eyes flicked to her like she was a problem he had not expected. He said he wanted to talk like adults. He said he wanted peace. He said he had been stressed and said things he did not mean. He spoke in long sentences, like a speech. Elowen poured water into glasses and kept her hands steady. She did not look at me much. She watched my hands. We sat. Soren started with an apology that sounded polished. He said he felt awful about the porch scene. He said he did not want the neighborhood to think our family was broken. He said he wanted to fix it quietly. He said he wanted me to come back, but only if I could be reasonable. He said the past needed to stay in the past. He said it like a person closing a door. I waited until he ran out of the first wave of words. Then I asked one small question. I asked who packed my suitcase. Soren blinked and said he did, because I would have dragged things out and made it harder. I asked why my mailbox label was removed. He said it was practical. He said it was necessary. I asked why he changed the lock before speaking to me. He said he felt unsafe, and he said I had been unpredictable. When he said unpredictable, Nell shifted in her chair. Elowen's eyes narrowed for half a second, like she was watching a line being delivered on cue. Then Elowen slid a paper folder across the table toward me. She said it was simple, and it would protect everyone. She said it was just an agreement about boundaries and support. She said it would help me and help Soren and keep things calm. The folder was thick, like it had attachments. I did not touch it. I kept my hands on my water glass, and the glass was cold against my fingers. Soren's smile tightened. He said I was being stubborn. He said I always had to make things difficult. He said this could all be easy if I stopped acting like a victim. He said I should sign and move on. He said he had done enough for me. He repeated the word mooch again, and he said it like it was a final label he wanted to staple onto my forehead. I looked at him and spoke slowly. I said I came to listen, not to sign. I said I would not sign anything at a dinner table. I said if he wanted to talk, we could talk. If he wanted paperwork, it would go through my lawyer. Elowen's mouth opened slightly, then closed. She tried to keep her expression smooth, but I could see a small crack forming. Soren leaned forward and asked if I thought I could scare him with lawyers. He said he owned the company. He said I had nothing. He said I was just a sad old teacher with no leverage. He looked at Nell and asked if she believed I could do anything. Nell did not answer. She held her water glass and stared at the tablecloth like she was refusing to be baited. I took my phone from my pocket and set it on the table, screen down. I said I was not here to scare anyone. I said I was here to end a pattern. Then I flipped the phone and tapped one contact. Reina Sato answered on speaker after one ring. Her voice sounded clear and calm, like a light turning on. I told her we were at the table. She said she understood. She said in indirect speech that filings had already been submitted earlier that day and that a process was active now. Soren laughed once and said that was a bluff. Elowen's eyes moved to the folder she had pushed toward me, and her fingers tightened around her own glass. Reina said she would speak in simple terms. She said a trust existed that connected to the company. She said my role had not been erased by time, and she said certain actions triggered certain remedies. Soren's face shifted from smug to confused. He asked what trust. He said I was lying. He said I had never had anything. He said I was making it up to look important. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a sealed packet. I placed it on the table, still sealed, and I said I would not read it alone. I said it would be read with witnesses. Nell leaned in slightly, and her breath caught for a second. Elowen's face went pale, then she forced color back into it with a fake smile. Reina said the trust had a protector function. She said, in indirect speech, that the protector could act when a beneficiary manager acted in bad faith or abused a vulnerable party. Soren interrupted and said I was not vulnerable. He said I was just dramatic. Reina said the porch lockout, the forced removal, and the seeded story about my mind were not family issues. She said they were acts that created legal exposure. She said those acts were documented with timestamps and witness statements. I placed another item on the table, a simple courier statement with a time and a delivery description. I did not dramatize it. I only said the packet for the lock change was delivered 2 days before the porch scene and signed by someone inside. I said the signature style did not match mine. Elowen stared at the paper like it was a snake. Soren said it was nothing and that paperwork happens. Reina said paperwork is exactly what courts and trustees respect. Soren pushed his chair back slightly and demanded to know why I had brought a neighbor. He said Nell had no business here. Reina said Nell was a witness to the public lockout and to the humiliation. She said public conduct has public consequences. Soren's voice rose. He said I was trying to destroy him. I said I was trying to stop him from destroying himself while he blamed me for it. Then Reina introduced Cyril Boone by name and said he was present for confirmation. My phone screen showed a video call request, and I accepted it. Cyril appeared, seated in an office with neutral walls. He looked straight at the camera and said, in indirect speech, that identity steps had been completed and that trustee actions were valid under the trust terms. He did not argue. He did not insult. He only confirmed structure and process. Soren's eyes darted between Cyril, Reina, and me. He said none of it mattered because the company was his. He said I could not sell what I did not own. Reina said the transfer authority had been triggered and verified. She said, in indirect speech, that a lawful sale agreement had been executed and placed into escrow. She said the purchase price was $8 million. The number landed like a weight on the table. Elowen made a small sound, not a word, just a breath that failed. Soren turned to her and asked what she knew. Elowen said she did not know what this was. She said I was manipulating things. But her voice shook, and her hands were not steady anymore. Reina said there was a second issue. She said a complaint was filed regarding suspicious invoicing and single approver control. She said the accountant's memo showed patterns that looked like misuse. She said, in indirect speech, that Elowen's approval chain was documented and that the company's lenders and compliance contacts were notified. Elowen's face hardened, and she said this was ridiculous. Soren looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I said I had not needed to make anything up. I said they had done all the work for me. I said I had simply stopped being quiet in the wrong way. Then I added one more piece, because truth does not need decorations. I said Kellen Drove had provided a statement about staff being told I moved away and that people were warned not to contact me because it could confuse me. Soren's mouth opened, then closed. He looked toward the hallway, like he expected someone to run in and fix it for him. Reina said the escrow release had already executed before dinner. She said the signing window ended 2 hours before dessert, exactly as planned. Soren slammed his palm on the table and said it was not fair. He said I was his father. He said fathers do not do this. I looked at him and said fathers also do not get thrown out like trash while neighbors watch. Soren's phone began to ring. Then it rang again. He stared at the screen and did not answer. Elowen's phone buzzed too, fast, over and over, like a warning bell. She stood up quickly and said she needed air. Soren grabbed her wrist and told her to sit down. She pulled away and said he was not controlling her anymore. Her voice broke, and the room felt smaller. I stood up slowly, adjusted my tie clip, and took my phone off the table. I told Soren in indirect speech that forgiveness is personal, but ownership is legal, and both were now decided. I told Nell we were leaving. Nell stood up without a word. Behind us, Soren's chair scraped the floor, and he called my name like it was a rope he could throw and pull me back. I did not turn around. As I stepped out into the cold night, I heard the ringing continue behind the closed door, and I knew the consequences had finally arrived, loud enough that even he could not ignore them.